Let's say you're given the following set of points, asked to plot them and make a polygon. So we're given -2, 7. I'm going to go ahead and label them also. We're given -9, 7. We're given -9, 0. And we're given -2, 0. I can connect each vertex. And I've created my polygon. Definitely a rectangle. Looks like it may even be a square. But if we are asked for the side lengths, what is the length of each side? Now, why would you want this? Well, you may need this when you're finding distance, when you're finding area, when you're finding perimeter. So one thing that we can do to find side length is just simply count the boxes. So let's say I want this side right here. I can start at one point, count on over till I get to the other. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My side length then is 7 units. I can do the same thing going vertically. Start at one point, count until I get to the other. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units again. So each side here is 7 units, which means I do indeed have a square. So one way is I can just count. Think about when we did area, perimeter, and we would count the boxes. Same type of strategy. Now, something that I want you to notice is that this side length is 7 units. Look at our x values here. -9 and -2. Now, if I take their absolute values, remember, absolute value is distance from 0. It's always positive. If I take their absolute values, the absolute value of -9 is just 9. And the absolute value of 2 is just 2. And I subtract them, 9 minus 2 is 7. So, if you are given a set of points, and maybe you don't have a coordinate plane, you're not able to draw it out, the other thing you can look at are the x values. If they're both in the same quadrant, so they're both negative or both positive, then you find their absolute values and subtract. Let's look at the vertical distance. And this time, I want you to pay attention to the y values. 7 and 0. Again, taking their absolute values, that's just saying 7 minus 0. And again, we get our distance, our side length, 7 units. So this, because my shape, my quadrilateral, was all in the same quadrant. We're in quadrant 2 right here. What I can do for a rectangle or a square is take the absolute value of the x coordinates, subtract, and then the absolute value of the y coordinates, and subtract. We see we get the same thing as if we were to just count. But what happens if you're not in just one quadrant? For example, you're given the point 1, -6. Then you're given the point 1, 8. I should label these. 1, -6, 1, 8. Then you're given the point 6, -6. And finally the point 6, 8. I can connect these points to make a rectangle. And we should notice that this time my rectangle actually is in two quadrants. We're in quadrant 1 and we're in quadrant 4. So we're going to do something slightly differently, but let's see when we get there. We can still use the strategy of counting. We can count the boxes. So if I want this horizontal distance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This side length then 5 units. And if I'd like now the vertical side length, I can also count, choose one point, start there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. This side length is 14 units. Now, how does that relate to the coordinates that you're given? Do you notice anything? Hopefully. The horizontal side length is going to correlate with our x coordinates. So if we look at the 1 and we look at the 6, how did I get 5? This time, we are just taking the difference between the two. 6 minus 1. The reason? These are in the same quadrant. Okay? So 6 minus 1. They're absolute values. That's how we got our 5. But over here, for this vertical side length, we are in a different quadrant, quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. So let's look at our y values because we're dealing with a vertical. 8 and negative 6. Well, if I do the same thing, the absolute value of 8 minus the absolute value of negative 6, this is telling me to do 8 minus 6, which is 2. That doesn't make sense. We can tell just by looking this side length is not 2. So when you cross the quadrants, when you're in more than one quadrant, instead of subtracting the absolute values, you actually add them. So we'll take our absolute value of 8, which is just 8, and now we're going to add our absolute value of negative 6. So this is saying 8 plus 6. And when we do that, we get our 14 units for our side length. So take home message, what is it that you need to know? If your points lie in the same quadrant, like they did over here for this entire shape, or like they did for the x values, the horizontal side length in this one. If your points are in the same quadrant, you can still count between them, or you can take their absolute values of the x values or absolute values of the y values and subtract them. That is for same quadrant. If we are in different quadrants, then we will add the absolute values.